Greetings to everyone. This is a message that I'm sending out to my friends who are Africans across the Atlantic, African Americans, African Caribbeans, as well as to Africans from the mainland. It is a message about our destiny as a people. And I want to share with you how I see the present and the future, especially as we are looking at transatlantic oneness amongst us as people of African descent, how I see the future in the light of the present and also, of course, in the past. And let's talk about this within the context of a movement that we call the African Forum on Religion and Government, AFReG for short. A bit of history about AFReG is that it was started in 2004 in response to a situation in Africa that is all too common, which is that it is a very religious continent. It beats the rest of the world in terms of religious activism. And yet at the same time, the social ills that are on the continent seem to be increasing in their complexity as well as their negative impact, as religiosity on the other hand is also on the increase. Religious activism is also on the increase. So you have the two, and it's a paradox. And so how do you resolve this? And I think that this was in the era of Olusegun Obasanjo as president of Nigeria. He obviously declared himself Christian, and so the argument was that if he would come forth and use his influence, he could bring other African leaders together so that we will address this subject. And so we were invited, the International Leadership Foundation, which I happen to be a member of, was invited then to facilitate the bringing together of about 200 leaders from all over Africa and also from across the Atlantic to discuss the role of religion in government. This was the main topic. Is it possible for our religiosity to translate into spirituality based on very strong, clear working principles? And then that spirituality in itself translates into morality and ethics that will influence the way we conduct our lives, the way we exercise leadership and governance, and the way we engage in servicing one another. So this took place 2006 and was a very successful event in July 2006. It was a very successful event. We had participants from close to 30 countries in Africa and had very wonderful conversation. And let's just talk about what AFReG is working towards. AFReG really has the vision of seeing Africa transformed into a premier continent based on God-centered values. And AFReG seeks to encourage collaboration between government and the church, to be more specific, to work in partnership to focus on the transformation of nations in Africa and the continent as a whole. And so how do you engage the church and government as two essential units, service units in society, to collaborate and focus on the transformation of the continent? So this is one of the major objectives of AFReG. Now, when you come to Christians in the church, you realize that the numbers are there. We do have the population, but the mindset needs transformation. We need to help Christians understand missions in a broader sense, which is that we do evangelism and discipleship to promote reconciliation between us humans and God. That's very, very important. But then we also have to look at the social dimension, which would be how we connect with one another as fellow humans. And that should be characterized by love. Jesus already gave us that, and God gave us that. So we already know we should connect with one another in the spirit of love. But that connecting with one another should actually address many issues at the same time. It should address the issue of exploiting one another. It should address the issue of taking advantage of one another. It should address the issue of dehumanizing one another. It should also address the issue of not having equal opportunities for all peoples. So we can just say love, but the love has to be translated into its practical ways of expression. The absence of it, the practical ways of expression have to be addressed. And as we are working on this, it's important for Christians to understand that, yes, the primary issue is our reconciliation with God, which is the vertical aspect of our relationship with God. But that is validated by the horizontal relationship between us as humans. God you have not seen. So if you say you love God, it must translate into how you relate to your fellow human whom you see. And so the horizontal, the human relational dimension validates the human-God relationship. And the human-God relationship, on the other hand, influences the human-to-human relationship. And so the church needs to understand that we, as Christians, have to engage with society to improve the quality of life so that people are living lives that are dignified and they are carrying the image of God in them. So we have seen a lot of progress as we have worked on the AFReG movement and engaged with issues of society. But we've had our forums where leaders have come and we've looked at issues. But in 2017, we had a different kind of forum in Elmina, in Ghana. Elmina is where you have one of the oldest castles in West Africa, and this is where slaves were kept, and this is where you have the door of no return. The slaves were kept in the dungeons long enough so they will lose enough weight and go through that door, but they had to have enough weight to remain alive. But once you went through that door and faced the Atlantic, you were not to come back. So it's called the door of no return. Very historic that we had our meeting there, and the purpose was to promote reconciliation between Africans and Africans in the diaspora. So we had about 31 African Caribbeans, African Americans, and another close to 200 Africans, and we engaged in a reconciliation exercise that was spiritual, very powerful, very meaningful. And we did that primarily because we as Africans know that the slave trade was engineered and driven by European interests. At the same time, we should be honest enough to acknowledge that there were some Africans who collaborated with the slave traders. And that gives us a responsibility to ensure, first of all, that we extend a hand of reconciliation to our fellow Africans across the Atlantic, and at the same time, we work together to ensure that nothing like that happens again in our lifetime and in generations to come. So that was part of the reason why we had this engagement at Elmina in October 2017. It was meaningful, and we followed that up with other similar activities In 2018, October 10, 2018, we had another ceremony in Kingston, Jamaica, where we engaged with Caribbean African leaders and extended a hand of reconciliation to them as well. Now, this is done in the spirit of ensuring that we take responsibility for our part, no matter how much small compared to the European responsibility in terms of percentages of responsibility. We had a part in it and we took responsibility for that. That is not to negate the other reality that a lot of Africans actually fought against the slave traders and against the slave trade to the extent that some gave their lives, to the extent that some chiefs were destooled or overthrown by their subjects because the subjects disagreed with the chiefs in their collaboration with the slave traders. So this is behind us. But the issue is, where do we go from here? And that is what should be our primary concern. And I believe that as a people, we definitely want to learn from the past. And that should instruct us in terms of what we do in the present. But we should be more concerned about creating a new future for ourselves and for our children, grandchildren, and so on. It is good to recount history, but it is better to make new history. That is the spirit in which I like to propose some ideas in terms of how we as a people on both sides of the Atlantic can work together to create a new future for ourselves. First of all, I believe that through the AFReG movement and other similar movements, we should promote pilgrimages to sacred sites. Point number one, we should promote pilgrimages to sacred sites. Too many of us do not really know the history. We don't know what really happened. It is important to go back to those places and, as it were, invoke the emotions and the spirit of what happened in yesteryears, to be able to relive it, not perfectly, because that's not possible, but enough to be able to appreciate the gravity and the significance of what took place. Without understanding the past, by getting as close to it as possible, we cannot understand ourselves as a people. That's a fact. And we cannot create a better future for ourselves. That's also a fact. And so there are many, many pilgrimage sites. Of course, you can talk about the Elmina Castle in Ghana. You can talk about the Gorée Islands in Senegal. We can name so many of them. But we should organize pilgrimages to these sites. I think even on the U.S. side, you have the Gula Islands, South Carolina, and these islands, slaves paid for the land, and obviously they wanted to protect it and also, as it were, preserve some of their culture. And so you go there, they are weaving baskets, the way they used to hundreds of years ago, and then, of course, they created their own Creole language. They had the freedom to use that within that community. But over time, we are losing that because they are losing the land as they are unable to pay property tax, and then the land is sold during tax sales. But I believe that the Gula Islands, among the Gula Geechee, are also part of our sacred sites, and we can actually do something with that. We can create in the Gula Islands, we can create an African village, right? The coming together of the two peoples, create an African village, which will make it a tourist site for Africans who are coming to the US and for Europeans and others to see the original African culture as we remember it, right? and to see it in the US. You don't need to come all the way to Africa. So you could actually have the great Zimbabwe recreated on the islands. So people who come there will see the great Zimbabwe. There's nothing wrong with even building the pyramids of the sizes we have in present-day Sudan. We have over 200 pyramids that were built by Africans, Cushites, in the 8th, 7th century before Christ. And some of them have remained up till today. And why don't we build some models of that to show that long before Europe began building skyscrapers, or even Europe became an identifiable unit with great forests, Africans were actually building story structures. And this is all part of our history, and a lot of us don't know. And so the Gula Islands provide us the opportunity to present something that will also add to our sacred sites. The second thing we can be doing together as a people is to be involved in transatlantic businesses. There are a lot of investment opportunities in Africa, and the Chinese know the African dream. All of us know the American dream, and we acknowledge it and we work towards it. A lot of Africans leave the continent to come to the United States to pursue the American dream, and they have to work as taxi drivers or cleaners or nurses, and some of them are qualified to be doctors and engineers, but they are pursuing the American dream here. What they have left behind is the African dream, but the Chinese believe in the African dream, so they go to Africa, and within a period of 3 to 5 years, they've made enough money to live, right? And the African dream is simply buying land, which has precious minerals, and having the possible investment of about $200,000 to get excavators and exploit the land, get some minerals, export them, sell, and make money. And so all of a sudden, you came as a struggling person, but you own land that has gold, you dig gold, you sell the gold with some minimal processing, and you are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is the African dream. Why wouldn't we have a lot of African Americans, African Caribbeans coming to the continent to, as it were, pursue the African dream? Because it's actually more promising than the American dream if you actually did the math in terms of what you can achieve within 3 to 5 years. We should also promote intertrade, so that we are looking at government-to-government engagement in trade, and that would be exchange of technology and expertise, as well as building commonwealth through trade between the nations. So Jamaica working with Ghana, Brazil working with Nigeria, those kinds of relationships are very, very important to forge. And without those things, I don't think that we are able to move forward as a people. And then the fourth thing is that some countries are now making it possible for people of African descent from the Caribbean or from the United States or North America, let's put it that way, and Europe, to come back and own land. You can actually own land. And that's a great opportunity to, make the most of both worlds. You have your life in the United States, but you could also have a home in West Africa or some other part of Africa, own land. And that is good. The fifth opportunity is to actually have citizenship. Some countries in Africa offer dual citizenship. So you could be American and you could also be Nigerian or Ghanaian. I think Ghana has gone ahead with that. And you should look into this. And I will say that it's very, very important to do this, because when you look at your name and just let's say you are called William Smith, all right, and you don't know the Smith family, they don't want to know you. They don't want necessarily for you to be seeking to be identifying with them. And so it's just part of your accidental history that you are called Smith. But it doesn't mean your great-grandchildren should be called Smith. It doesn't mean that. You could actually use DNA testing to identify your roots. And based on what you find, you can pursue the tribe, the ethnic group. And when you discover the ethnic group, you can choose a name and choose some families within the ethnic group to relate to. That way, your children, your great-grandchildren will have African names that they can refer to, and they will be able to refer to the science and the history behind those names, so that in 2060, 2070, 2080, they are not crying and shedding the same tears that you are shedding today. They will be able to proudly point to their new African heritage and the history and the science behind it. So that is what we should be focusing on. And I will say that we are living in a unique moment in our history. We can do something and make a difference. And my final point is really about the kind of shift in priorities that needs to take place. You know, I respect Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter because all lives matter. Black Lives Matter is basically saying Black lives also matter. But I believe that going on demonstrations on the streets and asking for help is not enough. In actual fact, when you are asking those who are in authority, supposedly those who have created the oppressive systems, to be the ones to dismantle it for you, you are taking a weak position. Freedom is not freedom until it is taken. Freedom that is granted is not freedom enough. Freedom that is taken is freedom enough. And so going on the streets and asking for help is one thing, is only one thing in the whole process. What is more important is taking responsibility to use the opportunities that exist to actually ask for change and fight for change in specific areas. So we should be talking about specific areas of security for our people in our hoods, our neighborhoods, and we should be talking about education. We should be talking about housing. We should be talking about health issues. And there should be teams of people who have the expertise and are actually lobbying and working on these. My proposition is that our efforts should go into these more so than going on the streets. And it is possible that we can make a difference. We can make the difference ourselves. It is not likely to happen that there comes a time that the powers that be will say, okay, we've decided we are going to make the African people or African Americans wealthy and very educated. That's not likely to happen. What is most likely to happen is we taking the responsibility to pursue education, to pursue opportunities, to generate wealth, and to create a commonwealth amongst our people to change the narrative. It can be done, and join us in the AFReG movement to create a new future for ourselves now and for our children and grandchildren and great grandchildren and the generations to come. God bless you.